You wake up one morning and something feels slightly off. Nothing dramatic has happened. There's not necessarily a crisis. You're just a little restless, a little unsettled. Maybe there's a tension that you just can't quite place. And then almost immediately, something else happens. You start trying to explain it. Maybe I'm not happy with my job. Maybe something in my relationship isn't right. Maybe there's something I'm trying to avoid. Maybe I'm not really where I should be by now in my life. Or there's something about me that still needs work. The feeling appears, and very quickly it starts becoming evidence. Evidence that something somewhere needs attention. And I think this movement is so ordinary that it's really easy to miss. Because of course, feelings can tell us something important. Sometimes something really is wrong. Sometimes there's a situation that needs to change. Or there's a problem that deserves our attention. I'm not questioning that. What I'm interested in is something much narrower. Whether the presence of unease by itself actually tells us what we often assume that it tells us. Because those are two different things. There's the experience, I feel unsettled. And then there's the interpretation, something must be wrong. Those can happen so close together that they almost feel like the same event, but they aren't necessarily the same event, and I think that distinction matters. Imagine you're at home one evening just sitting, nothing in particular is happening, but you start to notice that familiar restlessness. And for a few seconds, it's just a feeling. But then the questions begin. What's missing? What should I be doing? Why don't I feel better than this? Is there something I need to change? And before long, you're no longer simply experiencing unease. You're investigating a problem. Maybe the problem is your job. Maybe it's your relationships. Maybe it's your habits. Maybe it's your lack of direction. Maybe it's you. And perhaps it could be any one of those things. We're not ruling that out. That has to remain a possibility. But I wonder whether we even notice the first step that happens before the search began. The step where the feeling became evidence that a search was necessary. That seems small, but it can actually change the direction of a life. Because once the feeling means something needs correcting, attention has somewhere to go. You start looking for what needs correction. And if you're used to looking inward, that correction may very well become personal. You may start asking, what am I doing wrong? What haven't I understood yet? What pattern am I repeating? What still needs work? Again, those can be useful questions. The issue isn't that they should never be asked. The issue is that the feeling may have already decided the answer before the inquiry began. Whether you're really asking, is something wrong? Or whether you're asking, what's wrong? Because those are two different questions. One is opening the possibility to inquiry. The other is assuming the conclusion. And I think this may be one of the places where the project of self-correction quietly begins. Not necessarily with an explicit belief that you're broken or some dramatic decision to fix yourself. It can begin much earlier than that with an ordinary feeling and an interpretation that almost seems self-evident. I feel unsettled, so something must need to change. If that interpretation remains unchanged, every return of unease becomes another occasion for correction, another reason to examine yourself, another reason to reconsider your life, another reason to search for what isn't right. And over time, it can become difficult to tell where the search for genuine problem solving ends and where the attempt to account for unease begins. And I feel like that distinction is really important because the alternative isn't to decide that nothing is ever wrong. That would be just another assumption, and it clearly wouldn't be true, because people do have real problems. People, like relationships, can be harmful. There are jobs that definitely can become strained. Physical and mental issues that require attention, circumstances that genuinely require us to look at, take a hard look at, and possibly change. There's no question about that. The question isn't whether there are things in your life that require correction. The question is whether the presence of unease alone has made that correction already necessary. And if it hasn't, then there may be a small space between the feeling and the conclusion we draw from it. A space where we don't need to know in advance what the feeling means. Maybe something needs attention. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the feeling is connected to something specific. Maybe the connection isn't clear. Maybe we simply don't know yet. That uncertainty can be uncomfortable, but it's far more honest than immediately turning the feeling into a diagnosis. So next time that familiar unease appears, I think there's a question worth noticing. Not what do I need to fix, but something that comes before that. What exactly has this feeling proven? Maybe something, maybe nothing, maybe not enough yet. And I think that difference is exactly where this inquiry starts.